Hello friends, welcome to the TechBaySoft. So today I'm going to start Spring Boot series, but before that I want to cover some Spring Core features. What is Spring Core in brief, not in going into detail. I will make different series for Spring Core as well, which you can look on it. Okay, but yeah, we know right now everyone is using Spring Boot, right? So I thought like I should make some basic understanding of Spring Core and will apply the same in a Spring Boot, right? Because anyway you have to work on a Spring Boot only, right? In the industry right now, Spring Boot is a first requirement over the Spring right now. So what is a Spring framework? How does it work? Okay, that all we are going to cover here. So first thing, what is a Spring Boot version is going on right now? It's a 6.2.7 that is released in May 2025, right? So I think recently it has released, right? 6.2.7 right? That is the latest version of Spring Core, right? Spring. Then what is a Spring actually? First of all, you have to understand what is a Spring. It is a framework actually. It is a framework. So first of all, you have to understand what is a framework. Framework means it is a combination of some predefined classes and let me write down this here. It means, right, it is a combination of predefined classes and interfaces. That means in the framework we do get some predefined classes, right, and some interfaces that will reduce a lot of work in terms of coding, right? How it will do that we are going to look on it. So if you want to use Spring framework, we have to add some jars that is in the form of dependencies, right? That we do have to add it, and then it will having some predefined classes and interfaces that will reduce a lot of work, right? So first thing, if you want to talk about in Spring, what is a container in Spring? Because container will be the first thing if you want to talk about the Spring framework, right? So in container is responsible to manage the life cycle, like for example create, configure, manage, right? So it is a core component of responsible for managing the life cycle of the configuration of the application objects. And one thing you have to understand here, in Spring we will use one word called beans frequently, right? What is a beans? Beans is nothing like object, right? So we know that if you want to understand the Spring framework, right, you must know the Spring core. If you have Java core, if you have problem on the Java core, you will not understand what is Spring actually, right? So you just should know what is object-oriented programming, how does they work, okay? What are that inheritance, polymorphism, okay? These are the very important part, okay, that we are going to use in Spring, right? So in Spring container are something who will manage that, create, configure and manage these beans. Like in Java core, who does do that? That is doing by the JVM itself. So JVM is a one kind of framework who does do that. How does it that do that? Let us call that a thread scheduler at beginning, right? If you write any program, for that program first it will add thread scheduler then will schedule the thread, and then it will go for that execution of your program, will call the main method. After main method it will come to the at the end of the main method, go to the garbage collection will release that particular memory, right? That way it core Java work. Same thing, everything, like for example the life cycle for creating the object to destroy the object, everything that is doing by the container here. That's why I told you create, configure and manage these beans. Beans means what? Object only. Beans using dependency injection. So dependency injection is also one of the important part here, which we are going to cover. Right? So we have what is a container in Spring. So it is in a kind of managing that life cycle, creates, configure, manage. That is called container, right? So we have a different type of containers in Spring, right? What are the container we have? These are the two container: bean factory and application context. Right? What bean factory does? It is a deprecated kind of that is used Spring 2.0 onwards. From 3.0 onwards, I mean I'm talking about 2.0 version onwards, or 2.1, 2.2, whatever 2.1 that configuration is, right? Till that bean factory was there. But after bean factory, application context come in a picture. Application context is a kind of child of bean factory, that you can understand like that. So these are the two container which does help you to manage a lot of things internally, like creating the object, right, configuring the object, everything that is taken care by the this container only, right? So how does it do that? So first it will read the configuration file. So that is, if you're using Spring Core, that time you have to use XML file annotations or Java config, right? But in Spring Boot, we don't have to use any XML file kind of that, right? That is completely deprecate, I mean completely remove, okay, from the Spring Boot. Instantiate beans. So bean means object only, create the object of the instance of the bean, right? Inject dependency, it will inject the dependency, manage the life cycle, initialize restrictions, something like that, right? And provide the access. So provide the access, that all things are doing by the container only. Right? And then we have a two type of container: core container, JE container. JE container is application context, which is useful right now, right? So these are the two terms that we have to understand if you're talking about the Spring: dependency injection and IOC, that is inversion of control, which is nothing like a container, right? So application context is a one kind of container, right? So application context is also called by the IOC also. That means application context same like IOC. So whatever is doing by the application context, same thing is doing by the, so that means I can say that IOC is also one kind of container. Okay, IOC also is one kind of container. So let's look, understand here what is an IOC. It is an Spring IOC as a container control the creation, configuration, life cycle of the application of the objects, right? Same thing is doing, if you can see, right, same definition I've written for the container, and the same definition I've written for the Spring IOC also. So Spring IOC will be a one kind of container who does manage like creation, configuration, and the life cycle of the application of the beans, like instead of application code doing it, right? So this is the kind of inversion of control, right? Now after that we have to come to the next point. What is a dependency injection? What is dependency injection? So dependency injection is a one kind of design pattern, right? This will kind of inject the dependency, that is implement the inversion of control. So this design pattern implemented by the inversion of control, where our Spring container is responsible for providing the required dependencies. Okay, first of all you have to understand what is the meaning of dependency here. Okay, what is a dependency? Then we can understand dependency injection. Let's say I created one program here, like let me write here one class, say like class car, and I have one class, say like engine. Okay, or it could be any, I can say class car engine, or I can say it's suppose class, say like let's take car only, car and engine. That could be easy to understand. Okay, so we know that engine will be one part of car. So in the car, what I will do, I will create one object of engine, right? So what I will do here, I will use here engine, right, engine, and I will put some reference here. What I'm doing here, car is a one class which is having a some engine. Engine is a separate thing, right? But car cannot be complete without engine. So engine is a one class and car is a one class, right? But car is dependent on the engine. Without engine, car cannot be complete. So that is called dependency injection. So what is the dependency here? Dependency is nothing like a class on that the parent, I mean the class which is depend actually, right? So here car class is completely depend on the engine, right? Engine is not depend to the any other class. That is called dependency. So that means whenever we are using the class, right, that time we have to use engine, and engine will be inject in the car. First of all, engine object will be create, right? That will doing by the container itself. So container will create object of engine, right? Container will create object of engine, but engine should be inject into a car. That time we have to use one annotation, right? That is called at auto wire. If I will not do this, right, auto wire, that time this engine will not be inject here, right? Engine object will not be inject here. So we know that when do we create the object, right? Object will have two things. let me cover that as well. Okay, object will having a two things. What is the first one is called reference. I mean, man is a reference only, right? So object will having a one thing called reference. Let's say I'm creating an object of the car class. So like car c equal to, or like engine. Okay, let me create object of engine. Engine e equal to new engine, right? So here this new engine, right, it is an object, and what is the e here? It is nothing like a reference, right? So here in a e we can have a two things. Either it can have a null value or it can have a some address, right? If it is having an address, right, then it will call the engine class. Let me give you one example, then you can understand in a better way. So let me open a one core project here. Okay, let me do this here actually. End class engine. Please try to understand, it is one of the important features or one of the important point, right? So here if I will create any class, right, in engine, so I will create, if I want to use that engine here, right, what I will do, I will create object here. So engine e, or I can write here engine e equal to new engine, right? What is the difference both of them? Inside this e, right, I did not assign anything. So what is things will come under the e? So e will having a null here. So inside this e will having a null. What is under this e? Under this will having a some address, which could be, I'm thinking like suppose abc at 1 2 3, something like that. Address always will be in hexadecimal format. So we have a two engine e, where I did not create anything, but here I am writing engine e equal to new engine like a object, and object address is going to store under the e, right? So what is happening here, if suppose I did not do that, if I do not initialize it, right, object will be created, but then what happened, right, here like object is creating, right, but object is not assigning to the proper reference, like in this scenario, right? Let's say it is a e1. So here e1 is having address and e is having a null value. That time if I will perform any operation, suppose it is having a one method like void test, suppose it is having a one method like void test, which is doing some kind of operation, right? If I will call here e dot test, what I will get? I will get error, null pointer exception kind of that, right? It will not work. But if I will simply say here e1 dot test, then what happened, right? It will work fine and it will understand, okay, e1 dot test you are talking, that means e1 is having an e class object, that means you are talking about e class object test method, and it will perform this operation. So that is happening actually. So whenever we are using AutoWire, right, AutoWire do this kind of work. That means object is creating by the container. This new part we are not doing it, that is doing by the container, right? But what happened, right, inside this e1, right, what will do, it should inject the address of the object. If it will inject address of the object, then only I can call the method which is present under this engine class, right? If I will not, then what happen, right, it will contain the null value and then I cannot call the test method. So please guys understand this scenario if you want to understand dependency injection clearly. Without that dependency injection you cannot complete. So here you can see like I am putting that AutoWire. Let's say I will go to this example here. Like for example here, if I will put AutoWire here, right, then what happen, right, inside this engine, that means the address of the object will be copied. And if I will not put this AutoWire here, right, then what happen, right, inside this engine we will have a null value. If it is having a null value, right, you cannot perform or you cannot call any methods of the engine class, or you cannot perform any operation with the engine. So that's why AutoWire does very important role, or AutoWire does play a very important role here, right? So AutoWire does inject the value under the engine class, right? So car is a one class where we are having a dependency, car is having a dependency on the engine. So we want to inject that engine object in the car, right? So we want to inject engine into a car. So that's why we have to use dependency injection. That is happening automatically, only we have to pass the object address only, right? So we have to use auto wire. So same thing you can understand here. What is a dependency injection? That is promote the loose coupling between the classes, improve testability, right? Make the code more maintainable and flexible, and develop adhere or like develop to solid principle. Solid principle is a one kind of object oriented programming principles only, which does follow kind of single responsibility principle, open close principle, right? So that is doing is basically for dependency inversion principle. Right, so in sorted principle we have a dependency inversion principle, right? Same way dependency injection does work here. Right, hope I try my level best to explain this dependency injection. If you are still having a doubt, let me know. I will make a one more video for separate on dependency injection itself, because dependency injection is a very important role. IOC is also important, but IOC is happening internally, right? Dependency injection, we have to inject the dependency, right? So if we'll inject the dependency, then we have to use one annotation called auto wire. If you use auto wire, then only it will inject successfully, right? So dependency injection we have covered, IOC also we have covered. That is a core features, core functionality of the Spring core, right? So I have just explained that in a brief. If you're still having any doubt, let me know. I will make some other video as well, right, in the comments. After Spring, what could be the next? Core. So then if you want to understand Spring Boot completely, right, after Spring Core you should cover REST also. What is a REST? REST is full form representational state transfer. Right now REST are very important, right? The reason is that it will responsible to perform all the backend operation, okay, but it should be connect with any front end. Like for example, I'm writing a one Java code as a backend, right? Java code is a backend, right? And we have a like say Angular application, Angular or React or plain JavaScript like Ajax call. Okay, that was older fashion like that. So here Java object, Java code, it is in a backend that does implement, right, in Java itself. Angular, React, Java, Ajax that implement into a JavaScript. So what happened here, right? That is a front end and that is a back end. So what happened? Front end and that does send the request. First front end does send the request to the back end. That means Java. Front end does send the request to the back end, right? Then back end do some kind of logical operation, whatever it is, logical operation, right? Then it is connect with the DB database, depending on the operation, right? So front end does carry the back end does perform some logical operation, then it will go to the database, right? Then again response will come back from database to it will back to the back end, right? Back end, and then it will back to the front end. Now tell me here, two different technology are talking to each other. Front end, back end does do some kind of logical operation right here, and then DB, and then database to again it will go to the back end, right? And then it is going to the front end. So till that front end to this back end, right, this is called kind of request. So here it is doing kind of request operation, right? From there onwards, if I say like that, here it is happening kind of response. So here it is a kind of response. This response will send back to the server, and here this request will come from the client. So front end is like a client for us. Client will send the request to the back end just do some database operation, then database operation to go back end, and back end to go front end. So here request and response, these two things are play very important role, right? Request is what? The data we are sending from the front end to back end. Now let me know, front end is what? Angular, React and Ajax, which is a JavaScript framework, right? Back end is what? Back end is like a Java object. JavaScript object and Java object, they both are different. JavaScript maintain object differently. Core Java maintain that object differently. right? And they are talking to each other. Sorry guys. So how does it manage actually? So it is managing through the some operation which they do, right? That is performing by the REST only. So REST does provide some kind of annotation. So here in request, right, we will use one annotation called at request body. At request body, this is the one annotation that's predefined, right? What does it do? Request body does convert what? JavaScript object to Java object and bind with the entity as well. Right? Bind with the entity as well. So that is a use of request body. Right? Request body convert JavaScript object to Java object and bind with the entity as well. So let me copy this here actually. Okay, so for request, when it is going to front end to back end, right, we have to use request body. Request body does convert my JavaScript object, because from the front end, right, then backend will receive what? JavaScript object only. But Java object doesn't know how to deal with this. How to deal with this JavaScript object, right? Then it has to convert into a Java. How does it do that? That is doing by the request body annotation itself. Same like when the response will back, right? So in the response, what happened, right? That is doing by the response body. So in the response, right, convert. What does it do? Convert Java object into JavaScript object. And JavaScript object, here we will use JSON object, which is called JavaScript object notation, right? So here we will use one JSON many times, right? JSON, what is JSON? So JSON is nothing like a JavaScript object notation. So request here front end is going to back end, right? So when front end is going to back end, that front end is sent object in the JSON format where back end does not understand. So this JSON will convert into convert JavaScript object. What JavaScript object is called? JSON only, right? To Java object, and here response body will convert the Java object into the JavaScript object, which is nothing like a JSON only. So that is a use of REST actually. That's why it is called representational state transfer. It does say that I will represent the data. That does not matter what could be the front end. Front end could be any, does not matter it. It could be any front end, right? And it will manage the data completely, right? So that is about this lecture. Okay, I will add some more extra information on it, so please watch the next recording. So I will add that point on that, right? So in this I have covered only the Spring core features as well as some understanding of the REST API. What is a REST, right? So thanks for watching. If you like the video, please subscribe it. Thank you so much.